I know we have several people joining us on the Zoom. A lot going on today. So good morning, I'm Jason Avatari. I'm the senator for here in West Georgia, District 31. Thank you all for being here in person and those on the Zoom or online, joining us virtually just to discuss truck driver shortages in Georgia. Before we begin, I do want to open this up in a word of prayer, and I'm going to put Commissioner Virginia Galloway on the spot since we're in her commission district. She'll lead us in a brief word of prayer, and then we're going to kick off with some opening remarks, and then we'll get into testimony in a moment. Commissioner. Thank you, Commissioner. Before we begin with some remarks, I do want to acknowledge my colleagues. First in the room, State Senator Nabila Islam from Gwinnett County. Nabila, thank you for driving over and hanging out today. The chairman of our transportation committee in the Senate, Senator Greg Dozal from Forsyth County. Greg, good morning, good to see you. Our majority leader, Steve Gooch from Dahlonega, is on the Zoom, I believe. I thought I saw his face a second ago. If not, he will be here. And then also State Senator Emmanuel Jones from Henry County also. And thank you, Emmanuel, for joining us this morning. I do want to welcome everyone to Paulding County, Georgia. I do believe it is the greatest county in the state of Georgia. 200,000 people. And also, right across the street from one of the most famous residents, Travis Truitt, a few hundred yards down the road. But I do want to thank and acknowledge several folks in the room. First, Commissioner King, thank you for being here this morning. I look forward to hearing your testimony. I do want to thank the Board of Commissioners who have been engaged with the Senate, who have worked on transportation issues, who have attended Senate Transportation Committee meetings over the last year. Chairman Dave Carmichael and Frank Baker, thank you for being here. Commissioner Caker, Commissioner Galloway, Commissioner Dunn, Commissioner Stover, all of you taking a serious interest in economic development and what it means for West Georgia. I do want to recognize the mayor of Hiram, Frank Moran. Thank you, Frank, for being here and allowing us to come hang out in your city or maybe your future city, depending on how your future plans go. I'll let you and the Greystone folks talk about that later. And then I also do want to thank Greystone Power, Tim, Blake, for hosting us today. And thank you for everything that you all are doing. Tim, I'm going to give you a couple minutes if you'd like to speak and just say a couple of words. On the front end, before Tim speaks, I do want to ask that everyone keep your thoughts and prayers to family, friends, brothers, sisters in South Georgia. As the hurricane approaches, I know over the last few hours it's become more dangerous, and I know I've been in contact with our colleagues in South Georgia. Commissioner King is monitoring the storm with all the constitutional officers, bracing for the worst. But also to the women who are going to be clean up the aftermath of what hopefully won't be as bad as things, but prepare for the worst. And so the folks that work at like Greystone Power and the other agencies that do so many great things for all of our local communities, keep them in their prayers, in your prayers, as we look to the next hours, weeks, and days and ahead. So Tim, I'm gonna turn it over to you, and thank you.
Thank you, Senator. Appreciate you using our facility today. Because we are a nonprofit member-owned co-op. One of our major tenets that we try to live by is to be community-oriented. We're very thrilled to call Hiram our headquarters now. Since our inception in 1937, we've been located in Douglasville in Douglas County. This is the site of a former 200-acre farm, so we wanted to be a good neighbor. I think we have a 52-acre footprint here, and the rest of the land is going to remain fallow. We have lots of wildlife, deer, turkey, beavers, unfortunately, a lot of snakes, but we're very happy to call Paulding County home, and we serve almost 130,000 homes and businesses in portions of 8 metro Atlanta, western and northwestern counties. We're very excited about Paulding County and its future. We have more of our consumers living here in Paulding than any other county. And it is going to continue to be, with just the present growth patterns, our largest county of our 8 that we serve in Metro Atlanta. But make yourself at home. If you even want a Starbucks coffee, we don't tell this to anything, but we put in a Starbucks coffee machine for our employees. So just let Blake or myself know, and we'll walk you over there. But welcome, and come back and see us. Thank you.
Thank you, Tim. I do want to recognize Anna Horvath from my office. Anna, I just want to say thank you publicly for getting this all together, working with our Senate staff, Senate communications team, Senate research, everyone who's here today, to say thank you for all your hard work and all the things you do behind the scenes that maybe sometimes goes unnoticed. But Anna keeps me straight out here in the district and tries to keep our caucus in line. So if I'm not doing something right, go tell Anna and she'll fix it. I do want to say, I guess, to our team, if one of the senators just, I guess, wave a hand, or if they have a question, just make sure I don't miss anyone while they're on the Zoom. So we're going to go ahead and get started. Daniela Perry with the Georgia Chamber Foundation is going to talk about transportation and kind of what's going on in Georgia. And for the first meeting, just to highlight, today we're going to talk about opportunities. We will have a second meeting in September. We'll provide that date. Working with Coca-Cola for September, and then we'll have maybe one more meeting before we have a final meeting. The report will have to be voted on and completed by December 1st under the resolution that the Senate passed under Senate Resolution 155. And so we'll have more on that. So Danielle, I'm going to turn it over to you, and thank you for being here this morning.
Well, thank you so much, Mr. Chairman, for having me. Good morning, all. It's good to see you. My name is Daniela Perry. I serve as the Vice President of the Georgia Chamber Foundation. We're the research and data arm of the Georgia Chamber of Commerce. So excited to share a little bit of data about workforce shortages that we're seeing across the state, and of course, about those that are specific to truck driving. So just to kind of give a high-level overview, I'm sure this is not news to many of you, but want to certainly highlight the fact that we've had 4 years of record economic growth. And of course, Governor Kemp just announced yet another year of record economic growth. And I think this certainly can't be understated, especially we've seen other states across the country struggle to rebuild their economies coming out of the pandemic. We have been able to see opportunity, across the state in terms of jobs, investment, all the things that we've been eager to have. And of course, as a statewide chamber, we think it's incredibly important that we've seen 77% of this economic activity outside of Metro Atlanta and rural communities, because we certainly know that the future of our state depends on economic growth that covers all corners of the state of Georgia. So that's the great news, is that we've got tremendous growth, tremendous opportunity, but we certainly do have some challenges. And specifically, as we're thinking about workforce shortages, we've actually been tracking the number of job postings since 2020, back in May, to kind of make sure that we're tracking and able to understand what's going on in the economy. So on the graph here, you'll see we started in Q1 of 2021. You'll see there's certainly been some dips and variations. That big dip was the Delta variant in August of 2021. Big spike back up, and you'll see that we've leveled out a bit too for the past few quarters with around 350,000 job postings. Certainly, one thing to note is that since we've been tracking this since 2020, registered nurses and software developers are continually the top posting that we see. We've also seen tractor trailer truck drivers in this a number of times. It's kind of dipped down to number 5 or 6 right now. But when we look at specific regions of the state, that's when we'll kind of see it pop back up to that top 3, especially those that are in major logistics corridors that you can think about. I think some other key points to mention about this is that we have a little over 170,000 unemployed Georgians. And so if we're thinking about 170, that's certainly not 354,000. So certainly just getting those that are unemployed off of the unemployment rolls and into jobs will not meet our workforce needs. We have to really think strategically and innovatively to make sure that we're able to get individuals into those high demand jobs. And I think a huge opportunity with that is thinking about maybe those that have chosen not to engage in the workforce. Of course, unemployment rate doesn't capture those that are not currently looking for work. So that's why we like to use the labor force participation rate. And you'll see that there are nearly 40% of individuals that are of working age that are not engaged in the workforce. I often get questions about who are these people? What are they doing? Can we find them? If we could, I think we would love to make sure we're putting them in a lot of technical college programs. And I think that's certainly the opportunity. There is data available about unemployed Georgians. And we've got about 55% of those are women and 45% are men. I think the most interesting thing is the largest share in terms of like an age group is the 25 to 34. There's around 25.6% of those that are unemployed are in the 25 to 34 age group. So we're thinking about folks that are certainly able to get involved, but maybe don't know quite the best places to go. So talking a little bit more about labor force participation rate, because it's something that this isn't new. And I would say certainly our talent shortages and workforce shortages are not new either. We were starting to see these prior to the pandemic, but certainly the pandemic exacerbated those impacts. So this graph goes back to 2000 and our labor force participation rate actually peaked right before 2000, like the late 90s. So you'll see we've got that big bar graph, and obviously that was the Great Recession. We've got that skinnier bar graph towards the more far right, and that was the impact of COVID. So we've got some dips, but again, this kind of a downward decline in those that are engaged in the workforce. So again, as we're thinking about where's the challenges, where's the opportunity, we've certainly seen this downward progression, which isn't helpful when we know that we're increasing jobs, increasing opportunity. We've got companies that are relocating the state, companies that want to grow, but they can't necessarily because of availability of workforce. So again, just to kind of highlight from some numbers, but we are expecting by 2032, so a little less than 10 years, to have an increase of over 2 million jobs in the state and an increase of 1.2 million citizens. So this is really the opportunity. I think we're currently seeing, workforce shortages across the state in every industry, every skill level, but we know this growth is going to continue, and we know that it's something that we need to make sure that we're again thinking creatively and innovatively about how we build our talent pipelines different in order to meet our current workforce shortages, but those that we know are going to increase, especially when we think about retirement risk, how are individuals changing, understanding we'll have some baby boomers that are looking to retire in the coming years. So of course, we're talking about truck drivers, so wanted to also include some projections around freight. Of course, we know what a hub is for the state of Georgia for logistics. If you're thinking about the Port of Savannah, Brunswick, of course, our incredible railways, inland ports, all this opportunity, but we are seeing tremendous growth, especially as we look to the long term. So a 92% increase in freight flow by times by 2050. The ports are also expected major increases in TEUs for yard and berth to over 20 million by 2050. And in terms of warehouse distribution, so all that online shopping we've come so accustomed to is certainly increasing our demand as well. You can see tonnage will increase by 276% and value by 254%. So again, as we're thinking about all those needs, we know that the logistics and infrastructure is going to play a critical role in how the state's able to grow long term. So I do want to provide a little bit of data around specifically those workforce shortages for tractor trailer truck drivers. You'll see a little over 25,000 postings for jobs over the last 12 months. So this is all real-time labor market data that we utilize. I will say though that 25,000 is just the individual posting. So often companies will have one posting, but they'll apply or hire like 3 or 4 people for that job. So it's a limitation of the data, but it's kind of the most available we have. So I would say it would certainly be under 25,000 individuals that people are trying to hire. You'll also see that we've got almost 2,000 employers that are competing for this talent. So as we think about, the fact that we've heard folks will leave, for 50-cent increases and things like that, there's a significant challenge to get folks on the ground and to make sure that we're able to build up our workforce in the way we need to. A little over 6,000 hires per month. And I also wanted to include those age demographics because this is an area where we see retirement risk playing a role. Obviously, when you've got nearly half of those jobs are, over 45 years old, it presents a significant challenge to make sure that we're getting folks into the workforce at a younger age. Of course, in order to have a CDL where you're able to cross state lines, you have to be 21 years old. And so that is a challenge and probably why you see that lower side on the 19 to 24 age gap. Thanks, Lexi. You're good. Perfect. Thank you, Lexi. So I also wanted to include mechanics. This is an area that we hear about a lot, not just tractor trailer truck drivers, but of course, as we're thinking about logistics, where do we go from here? This is an area we continue to see opportunity and growth. And so you'll see that information too. But again, here's we're looking, you've got a significant number of individuals that are over 45 years old. And so as we're thinking about how do we make sure that individuals in our high schools and middle schools are aware of these opportunities, aware of the salary, career advancement that they've got in some incredible industries that'll provide them a high quality of life and good opportunity over the long term. So I'm certainly happy to take any questions or share any additional information. But again, I appreciate the opportunity to be with you all and to share a little information that we're monitoring.
Thank you, Daniela. I'm going to start on the Zoom. If there's any questions from Senator Dozal or Leader Gooch.
Hey, good morning, Chairman, and thank you, Daniela. The percentage over 45, that actually seems to kind of be the median workforce age anyway, 21 to 65. So how does that compare? Is that an outlier with other industries? Because actually 40% to me does not, over 45 does not seem out of line unless I'm missing something.
No, certainly, I think that we see certainly when we kind of look at this nationally of how do we compare to other states, we've got a tool that shows us kind of that retirement risk. We're slightly above the national average in terms of like how they monitor it and see some of those retirements. Of course, we are seeing people work longer, and I think that's something that we'll continue to monitor if individuals say, I want to work over 65, closer to 70. So it's something that certainly isn't, you don't have to retire at 65, but as we're thinking about individuals that are older, they may want different kinds of benefits or flexibility. And so it's just something to be mindful of as we think about our long-term workforce needs.
And as it relates to the younger workforce, Mr. Chairman, if it's okay to ask one more question.
Yeah, take your time. We have time.
We have worked with Georgia highway contractors in the state to provide simulators in a number of high schools relative to heavy earth moving equipment. I know there's similar simulators that are available for aviation, but also for truck driving. Has there been any pilot programs that you know of in Georgia specifically targeting training high schoolers? So I know that they're not eligible for interstate, but intrastate, I believe they would be even upon graduation. Are there any pilot programs that you're aware of to kind of get them plugged into the workforce?
I'm aware of the highway contractor program too. It's a phenomenal program. I know we've got some partnerships with Be Pro, Be Proud, and they certainly are kind of doing outreach with individuals on making sure people understand those opportunities. I know we've got a number of companies that are making investments, but I don't know if they're making it specifically on that like middle and high school front. But I'll certainly kind of do some research and we can get back to you on those as well.
Thank you. And I'll just throw out a data point out loud. The Chairman Dozal's point about the heavy equipment operator pilot sites and virtual training. So basically 15 schools, and on average per site, the cost is about a $400,000 investment. And I know they're working to expand that. So I think that's probably something that probably does garner greater and further conversation in terms of how do we support these across the state. So thank you, Chairman Dozal, for raising that. Any other questions? Senator Islam. Go ahead, Senator Gooch.
Yeah, I wanted to apologize for getting on late. I had to finish up a meeting this morning in my office. I really regret that I couldn't be there in person. In your presenter may have already touched on this, and you may have other presenters that's going to talk about it shortly. But the biggest complaint I hear around the state from literally in every industry, because every industry is touched by the trucking industry and the trucking shortage, the drivers and all, but there seems to be a huge slowdown and a barrier to entry because the training requirements are so lengthy. It takes, way too long to get a person certified to drive these trucks, regardless of experience. I think there should be some consideration at the federal level. If someone that has experience driving trucks or heavy equipment, they probably don't need the same amount of time in a classroom learning how to get their CDL as somebody that just came out of school, never been behind the wheel of a car greater than 6,000 pounds. Is any discussion on that being held today?
I think certainly we hear from a lot of companies, especially on that, 21 age, but certainly I have heard that previously some training was able to do on site at employer sites, but we have some of those restrictions with the federal rules. But I think there's certainly the opportunity to consider what are those opportunities within training, and be able to have those flexible relationships. I know we've gotten lots of member companies that are doing significant work with our universities and technical college partners to make sure that they make it as fast and easy as possible. But certainly having more of those would probably be beneficial all around.
Yeah,
Thank you. And one follow up on that too, if you don't mind, Chairman. So the CDL requirements are mandated by the feds for interstate, but can we not relax some of the requirements, the training requirements for truckers that are going to stay in state, primarily your truck drivers, your small business people that are driving dump trucks and equipment trailers that really don't need to worry about going cross country. They don't have to have the same driving requirements that those truckers would have. Anyone do anything on that?
I was in Macon a few weeks ago, and Chairman Larry Walker with his occupational licensing study committee, they certainly brought that up and thought about those opportunities. So might be some good crossover for both of these study committees. Certainly, I know they're having the absolute similar considerations of how do we think about the CDL from the state perspective and have some flexibility there while we wait for some action in Washington.
Thank you.
I have a quick question. Those statistics that you shared in regards to the number of people that are truck drivers and the different age ranges, is there a differentiation between like full-time employees and independent contractors?
So our data just kind of aggregated, didn't break it down for those two sectors.
Got it. Thank you.
Yeah.
thank you. Any other questions? Daniela, thank you. I think there probably does warrant more discussion, and we may even hear more of it today from some of our speakers, just in regards to, I think, the increased federal burdens that we're hearing around CDL driving and training, and the federal government continuing to want to just keep shoving things down our business owners' throats and drivers. So I think that'll probably warrant more conversation. But thank you for coming out here today. Thank you for everything that you all do for Georgia and local businesses.
Well, thank you again for the opportunity.
Thank you. Next up, we're going to have Commissioner John King, who's our Insurance and Fire Commission, Safety Fire Commissioner. I think the last time you got to be together, you gave me a lot of grief down in Middle Georgia. So I think it's my turn since
You deserve
Right in the
all,
beginning.
you deserve every bit of it.
I do. Yeah, so for those that don't know, so John and I go way back. We're practically brothers. I guess I was a city councilman, you were a police chief, and you did a good job. I mean,
Most of the time.
I mean, you took the political pot shots while you're in the war zone. So this guy can handle it. And just want to thank you for what you do as a commissioner, but also too, I think all the, and I know publicly we've talked about it, but all the stories and I think personal experiences you've had as a police officer, but also, somebody who served in the Army, working up the ranks to become general and being on the battle, literally in the battlefield and those things, and taking those experiences in terms of dealing with natural disasters and everything that you have in your career now today, leading our state. So thank you for being here to talk about this important topic.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate the opportunity have this conversation today, because I think this is probably one of the biggest challenges that we're facing in Georgia. And again, many folks might be wondering, why is the state insurance and safety fire commissioner testifying about trucking in shortages in Georgia? Well, I will tell you, the answer is relatively simple. There is no trucking industry in Georgia that if we can't find affordable insurance. I mean, that's the bottom line. If you know, I know that you know, some of the questions that got brought up today, as far as you know, the requirements for trucking by the federal government, but there's an additional requirement. Insurance companies put some tremendous requirements on drivers. They have to have so many safe miles under their belt before they'll even willing to sell insurance. And so, you know, early last year, senior leader of the legislature asked me, hey, we can look at this. What is the problem? Why we're having such many problems getting insurance and what can we do? And so I had our team. We have an incredible bunch of folks that went and started looking hard at the data, talked to the folks in the chamber, talked to the trucking industry about what are the root causes and what are the things that we could do as a state to try to bring some relief. And it was the immediate recommendation was that I want to discuss today with y'all. The quickest thing that Georgia can do is repealing direct action, the direct action law. And what is direct action? Georgia's an outlier. Only 4 states in the nation have direct action. Other states that we share this issue with, Louisiana, whose insurance marketplace is a wreck. Probably one of the worst in the nation. Wisconsin and Kansas. So Georgia's only one of 4 states in the nation that allows this action to take place. So none of our immediate surrounding states, South Carolina, Tennessee, Alabama, Florida, have direct action. And so the incredible amount of pressure right now in our industry is occurring, and our neighbors are catching up very quickly. We brag about Georgia being the #1 state to do business in, but our states around us are catching up. They're watching for opportunities and they're taking advantage of that. This is sad. California and New York have better protections for trucking companies. That's not something that I'm terribly proud of. Georgia does not allow an insurer to be named as a defendant in any other business except for trucking. So imagine this, only the trucking industry is subject to these kind of requirements where an insurance company can be named as a named defendant on any lawsuit. No other company, no other line of insurance. This is an outlier. And in fact, mentioning an insurance company on any other kind of lawsuit can lead to a mistrial. So why does Georgia have this? Why does Georgia have this law? The most common argument in favor of direct action is that it's often necessary for finding and serving trucking company with papers on a lawsuit after an accident. While this might have been the case back in the 1930s and 40s, when we didn't have a Department of Transportation and people did not have to register their trucks, their drivers, and all the federal, not only the federal requirements, but also state requirements, that is not the case today. Commercial motor carriers are required to file proof of insurance with the federal government. That information is made available to the public instantly. There's a strict reporting requirements after an accident involving a commercial motor carrier, including detailed information on the carrier and its insurance provider. I know the folks of the Motor Trucking Association are here and they will go into probably greater detail on these requirements. So I'll let them provide that function. The fact is, any competent lawyer, and I have to have confidence in our law schools that produce quality lawyers, do not need this prop for them to be successful in court. So again, why do we need direct action in Georgia? Simply, it's about the money. It lets lawyers have a direct advantage Why does, this is one of the quotes from law firms that sue trucking companies. Why does Georgia direct action statute matter in a truck accident claim? When a jury understands that there's a giant commercial insurance company is responsible for the damages, they're far more likely to issue a larger award. That's the bottom line. It's that simple. Defendants and direct actions want to keep it on the books because it leads to larger jury awards. But this is a problem. Large jury awards of large losses against insurance, large losses lead to higher insurance premiums for trucking companies. And higher insurance premiums make it more difficult to start a business and to remain in business. This is especially true for smaller trucking companies, veteran and minority owned. It costs an average of $17,000 to insure one truck in Georgia today. That is prohibited. Nobody's going to be able to start a company that does trucking in our state with that kind of cost. In addition to all the training and all the other things that a trucking company has to do. It is cost prohibitive, and it especially affects veteran-owned and minority-owned businesses, which is something that I've taken an incredible interest in trying to promote. While it's easy to use the big bad insurance companies as the villain, the truth is commercial auto hasn't turned a profit in Georgia in 10 years. Higher insurance costs for trucking companies also lead to higher shipping costs, and those costs get passed on to the consumer on every product that gets moved across our state. And that leads to more expensive products. I want to be clear for one thing. I am not advocating for a change on behalf of the insurance industry. I have been very capable of holding insurance companies accountable. I've issued the largest fine against an insurance company in Georgia history on our for a health insurance carrier. In the past legislative session, we passed a bill giving our office additional authorities over rate approvals, over the objections of the industry. We force a car insurance company to pay full taxes for any vehicle that received a total loss. And we just forced a home insurance company to retract thousands of non-renewal notices that had been issued illegally. So I'm not shy about holding insurance companies accountable. I want to make one more point very clear. Repealing direct action does not cap judgments. It does not keep somebody from getting their fair day in court. And it doesn't, and all it does is treat insurance companies just like any other business in our state. It's about fairness. That's the bottom line. Repealing direct action is not also a silver bullet. It was not going to magically drop all our insurance rates. We have inflation, post-pandemic supply issues, weather events, and the high rate of auto accidents in our metro areas. Those are factors, but repealing direct action will be a significant factor in bringing companies who have left the state or have reduced their activity in our state to return back to the market and compete for your business. If we want to continue being the #1 state to do business in the nation, we need to have fairness in our legal system. While there's much larger conversation that we had for other lines that we need to have reforms in, and the governor understands, and he's come in support of one of these as one of the strategies to try to bring fairness into our court system. And I'm proud the Governor Kemp has signed on and understands the impact. As this committee continues to study the factors impacting Georgia truck driver shortages, I would ask you to seriously consider a full repeal, a recommendation for the repeal of direct action. We should be doing everything in our power to encourage job creation. Repealing law that negatively singles out Georgia trucking industry and drives up costs for all of us is a good place to start. And I thank you so much for your time. And I'd probably like to answer Senator Gooch's comments. One of the strategies that we've pursued is going after young men and women who are leaving the military, who've been in the transportation industry. If you can pull a 72 tank on the tank trails of Fort Stewart, Georgia, and you present your logbook, you ought to get credit for that. And that is what our conversation is with insurance companies, to allow those materials to be taken for credit, because it's not just sufficient to have a CDL, license in Georgia. You also have to have a number of miles under the supervision of a trained driver before an insurance company is willing to approve a driver to operate and to be insured. A good comment on the use of simulators. The military has used simulators for almost every line, including truck driving. And so we're trying to pursue with the Technical College of Georgia to have a training course where we can get the information of the safe miles under supervision of an instructor on a simulator that should be given as part of a credit for insurance companies to give credit to a young driver so they can have safe miles under a belt so they can be insured. With that, I'll pause and try to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Commissioner. Senator Gooch, you have your hand raised.
Hey, thank you, sir. Thank you, Commissioner King. We appreciate your passion and your hard work and what you're trying to do. And as you know, the Senate has been leading the way on this issue for about 4 years now in different areas of tort reform or civil justice reform. And we completely agree. I do personally. I know Senators Anavatare and Dolezal too have worked on this issue. We want to make this one of our top priorities next year in the Senate. Every trucking company I talk to they're repeating the same thing you've been talking about. But one of the things that the people on the other side of the issue are saying is, regardless of direct action, it will not impact our premiums going forward. They're saying that, can you guarantee our premiums will go down? And I sort of laugh at that. I said, I can't guarantee they'll go down because I don't control claims, but I can guarantee they're going to continue to go up if we continue to see these runaway jury verdicts in the tens of millions of dollars for frivolous lawsuits. And so can you address the comment that the naysayers are going to throw back at us, saying that this will not lower premiums for trucking companies, and which ultimately it gets passed down to the customer and the consumer on every situation?
Well, thank you so much for that comment, sir. And you're completely right. And there is no silver bullet. This is a very complex question, but I will guarantee you, companies not riding as much in reducing the products with less competition in the marketplace, your rates will go up. Because only the large carriers will be able to, I mean, a large carrier can diversify their insurance by having surplus lines, having a number of ways that they can, self-insure to a certain level. But a small minority-owned, veteran-owned company that wants to start into this industry with 1 or 2 trucks, there is no way they can start off. And I think that's not the Georgia way. I think we ought to be, trying to level the playing field. The fact that Georgia is only one of 4 states in the nation that has this, and so the states around us are taking advantage. Companies are selling. Georgia companies are slowly reducing the number of policies that they're. And we had 6,000 policies non-renewed just last year. And this was one of the big indicators. But they're moving to Tennessee, and they're going to be selling the same product. And so a response, and it's an easy way for the opposition to try to get us to prove a negative. Because yes, I'm not. It is not a silver bullet, but in the perfect world, I can guarantee you that with less competition, the cost to the consumer for every product that gets delivered to your home will increase.
Thank you, Senator Gooch. Senator Dolezal, do you have anything?
Thank you, Commissioner. Appreciate your testimony. As always, you've worked hard on this issue ever since you were appointed and then elected. So thank you for that. I'm curious, as it relates to that, one data point that could be helpful would to know, how do our premiums compare to those surrounding states? Is there a way for you to do some sort of apples to apples comparison to maybe give us a trend line?
We are higher, sir. We're one of the highest in the Southeast, and our team can pull the data. We'll be able to make that part of the record. But companies are very reluctant. So what we do is we do comparisons with insurance commissioners of other states, and we basically go in and we try to price using the Independent Insurance Agents Association here in Georgia, and he says, "All right, price me the cost of insurance for a truck," and then we use the same description to go to Tennessee, to South Carolina, and Florida, and the challenge is it's gonna be higher, but the problem in Georgia is nobody's willing to, nobody's willing to, you can buy insurance, but $17,000, a good example in Georgia right now is the average, is it is the outlier for the Southeast. It is not that expensive in other states. And the main reason is because of the state of our tort.
As a follow-up, Mr. Chairman, Commissioner, I know you mentioned when you testified before the Transportation Committee on direct action that I believe you said we were down to 3 carriers in the state for trucking. How does that compare to 5 years ago or 10 years ago or some period of time that you could help us understand what's happened in the state?
The 3 major carriers are doing, but what they've done is what they're doing is a lot of other, you can find insurance with other carriers, but it's so cost prohibitive. It's like trying to buy, a surplus line insurance, like for the coast or for, and so you can buy insurance, but you're priced out. And so a large company, a large motor carrier that has a presence in multiple states can structure their insurance risk by, for example, self-insuring a portion of their risk up to so many $1 million because they have the capital. But if you don't have the capital, you can't even enter the market. And so what we're seeing is, I talked to a young veteran that wanted to start a logging and trucking company down in Southwest Georgia. He was having to go and partner with another company, pay him a fee so he could get insured. And so that's, you're not going to be with the amount of demand that we have. And I tease Senator Hannah-Vitale right now, the tank farms in Doraville, Georgia, for a CD commercial driver's license with a hazmat endorsement, starting pay for a driver is $89,000. So we're losing police officers to go drive trucks. And this is, the pressure is intense. And of course, the drivers are hopping from one company to the other. And so the pressures in the market are tremendous. And I know I'm the insurance commissioner, and I'm not trying to protect the insurance industry. I'm trying to go and making sure that Georgia has, an industry that moves our commodities across our state and not crushing the consumers, but focusing on startups, especially veteran-owned and minority-owned companies. They can't even enter the market because they just don't have the capital available.
Thank you. Sarah Islam, do you have anything? You're good. Commissioner, thank you for being with us this morning and safe travels. I know you're headed to go do some work and help those with the storm coming as we speak. So thank you, and to your team, be safe.
Thank you so much, Mr.
Thank you. See you soon. Next up, we have Louis Collin, the CFO of Taylor Transport in Bartow County. You want to come on up?
Thank you for having me, and by no means am I a speaker. But only to what the insurance commissioner was saying, and that's kind of where I was going. The thing here is the tort here is killing us. The nuclear verdicts are killing us. And that's me personally. I don't have no data, but I'm just going to tell you our feelings on it. The reason we're having a truck driver shortage is anybody sitting in this room, they get up, get in their car, and they go to work. They do their job and they go home. You hire a truck driver, it takes them a half a day to fill out an application. Everything's scrutinized. Then let's just say after he gets hired, then we as a company have to put in twice as much as the feds require to cover us, to protect us from these insurance, from the lawyers and stuff. And that's, I would say, why would you want to put yourself in that position? Even though he said, you can start $89,000 a year. If you weigh the odds, why would you want to put yourself there? And I think a lot of the reason we don't have drivers now is because they don't want to put themselves in that position. And, that's the kind of stuff that we have to deal with. Right now, just because you have applications they have to meet the federal criteria and our criteria. So that limits it to, number of drivers you can hire, but it gets back to, you have to protect yourself because, there's even been suits that sue the people that hired them, so it's a big problem. And I don't know that you can change any of the rules and regulations because it's federal. But, and another thing that really hurt the driver situation was ELDs when they started in 2018. Everybody's been driving down the road and, you might get a little sleepy, pull over, get you a cup of coffee. Well, a truck driver used to could pull over, log out, take a nap, and 2 hours later, wake up and go back, you can't do that anymore. Once you start daily, you have to go. So there's a lot of things that they've made to call it better, but some's better and some's not. So, and yeah, we think that's the reason we're having driver issues. And as far as the young people, that's a catch-22. I mean, the thing about it is, how many 20-year-olds do you know that you'd put in a truck? And I'm not going to say there's none. Matter of fact, there's two sitting right back there. Our owner and vice president that started young, but they're few and far between. I got 2 kids. I wouldn't have put neither one of them in a truck at 20 years old. So the young part is going to, I'm not saying, I'm not against it, don't get me wrong, but back to the point, you have to protect yourself. You need somebody that is mature enough to do the job and to do it safely. And I'm not saying that there's not any out there, but I think that's something we're going to have to tread lightly on going forward, because that seems to be the talk to getting younger people in. And we could hire younger people with less experience because we are not in conventional insurance, but we choose not to protect ourselves. We do every once in a while, but it's a very special person, or maybe he has been to another company and worked a year under their training program, and then, we take that as a better training. So, but far as the driver issue, that's just part of what my thinking is. But still, our tort is going to be a problem. I mean, we're going to have to get something done about these, my billboard attorneys and waiting. I mean, we have people pull out in front of us purposely. We do a lot in Metro Atlanta. You'll have people do it to get hit. And if you have a fender bender in your car, you fix your cars and you go on about your business. You have a fender bender in a truck, we've got the suit papers within 24 hours. And, you had, $2,000 worth of damage between both vehicles. So this is a big thing that needs to be addressed. And, when Georgia is above California in the suit levels, that's a bad situation for us. So that's my feelings on what we have going here, if we could get some help on it.
Thank you, Mr. Coleman. A couple questions I have, and then we'll go to the Zoom. Can you talk about what those impacts, how does that impact directly you being able to run your own business, to, support customers? And then secondly, can you talk through, just since you're given the day in the life of a truck driver, the peer companies that work in y'all's industry, similar size business to you all, what is the experience like in terms of the training? If you compare the private sector to the public sector, are you using, a vendor to train or whatever? Maybe not for y'all, but just, I know there's some really good and really bad stories of, training people, but then, they can't even stay on the job for 48 hours because they really don't know how to back up a truck or those basic things. Can you talk a little bit more just in terms of what is that direct impact on your company and being able to literally operate day to day?
Well, and that, that backs up to one of the things, far as the federal government, if a driver has a driver's license, they consider him a driver. But we as a company require a driving test, or a road test to verify the person can drive. And now as far as, training, we don't have the capabilities of doing any training because we don't have enough employees. We may do some training we're very versatile in our different scopes of our business. So some of our guys go from one to the other. They want to come off the road or go on the road. And so we train that in-house, but far as the driver training, we generally just try to hire people that's already trained and ready to go.
Got it. Thank you. Senator Good, Senator Dozal, any questions?
No, I want to just thank the gentleman for being here today, and we feel your pain. I have a business as well, and I received a letter from my insurance carrier back in June that they will no longer provide insurance coverage for companies inside of Georgia after next year. And so I'm one of the people that are going to be looking for a new insurance carrier over the next 6 months. And so I'm going to do everything I can to help try to right the ship and not in an extreme way. I just think we need to look at the facts and the data, like Senator Dolezal said earlier, and let's compare apples to apples between Georgia and other states and try to figure out why we are where we are. And I think a lot of the issues, we talk about torts and we talk about jury verdicts. A lot of these cases never make it to a jury trial because the insurance companies don't want to spend hundreds of thousands of dollars or millions of dollars in fighting these cases that end up being settled. And so they settle before they ever go to court. And that also drives up our premiums and drives businesses out of our state, and it drives insurance companies out of our state. And so we definitely need to take a close look at what we can do to be like the other states around us. We don't have to be to the extreme on either side, somewhere in the middle on this one, I think. So thank you for your comments this morning.
Senator Dozal, you have anything? You're good. Senator Islam. Louis, thanks for coming by and telling us your story, and I'm sure we'll be in contact with you as this committee evolves into where we're going. Ed Kroll, you're up next with the Georgia Motor Trucking Association to talk about what's going on in the world today. How are you?
I'm well, sir. How are you?
Good.
Hey, Senator, Mr. Chairman, thank you for having us. Thank you for taking time to look at this important production. Let's see, what do we want to do? All right, I just want to say thank you to the real life senators and the online senators. Thank you all for taking the time to listen to us here. A lot of actually what I want to talk about has already been touched on. I might get a little more granular on some of the data, some of the information, and then be happy to answer questions. You've already heard it from Senator Gooch and from others, and we call it our driver shortage because it does affect everyone in Georgia. Let's see, how do I drive? All right, drive for me. The first thing I want to do is show you a misleading chart. And I say it's misleading because you see that straight line that goes from one data point to the other. That is not the truck driver shortage. That's not what it looks like. The truck driver shortage is growing, but it looks more like a stock market chart in real life. That is, it goes up, it goes down. In different sectors, there may not be a shortage right now today. At different times, there may be less of a shortage. When the economy slows, there's less of a shortage than there is, at other times when things are going great guns. And so the idea that there's a straight line for us to deal with is a little bit misleading. If you'll move on. I do want to talk on a couple of things. I want you to see that these are actually good jobs we're talking about. You already heard somebody mention 89,000 at the tank farm. We'll talk about that. But it has many facets and it has many inputs. It's an employee shortage and it's an entrepreneur shortage. And again, that's something we've already touched on. Trucking has always had a foundation of men and women starting their businesses, starting small companies. Some of them make it, some of them don't. But it's an integral part of the trucking industry, those 1 and 2 and 5 and 10 truck operators that are the backbone of freight movement, the backbone of servicing the economy. And they are getting killed. They are getting wiped out. It's getting tougher and tougher, as you've already heard, for them to get started. And again, I didn't mean to focus on tort. Several people already have, but we'll certainly touch on that in a minute, if you would. Some of the problem that we have is actually a demographic problem. We estimate there'll be 80,000 drivers short in the United States, but we're not unique. We're not alone. As you can see, others are short. China, of course, that 1.8 million is because they basically killed their own population for decades. And now they find out that not having children is a bad idea. So they're way short of what they need in the workforce, and they have all kinds of issues. But everywhere else in the Western world, we have the same demographic issues. And you can move on. And this is something we touched on earlier as well. And Senator Dolezal, you asked about it. This is the kind of information I think you were looking for. You can see that trucking skews older than most other industries. You can see construction, professional business, and all U.S. industry on average, much younger workforce than what we have in the trucking industry. So the retirement risk is much greater for trucking. And then you'll see at the front end, the entry point is much lower. That lower number of people in that 20 to 24-year-olds is a real issue for the industry. Part of that you can't really affect at the state level because it is that ban on under 21 operating in interstate commerce. I believe it's 48 states that allow 18-year-olds to drive tractor semi-trailers, Class 8 vehicles. They've been doing that for forever. And the idea that 18-year-olds can drive trucks is not new. As the gentleman said before me, you don't want every 18 or 19-year-old that you meet driving a truck, but there are some who are capable of it. We're not even allowed to talk to them unless we have a strictly intra-state job. They don't have an opportunity. And that's one of the reasons you don't see a big push for simulators at the high school level. Most of those people have got to come out and find something else to do before we can get serious about them 21, 22, 23 years old. I would point out that in Europe, you can drive a commercial vehicle, full-size commercial vehicle at 18. In Mexico, you can at 18, and in Canada, you can at 18. The U.S. is a real outlier in banning them until 21 for interstate commerce. But you can see where the risk is demographically, and our concern is that our truck driving workforce is aging, is a more aged cohort than in other industries. And the same holds true for the mechanics as well. Move on. These are comments from truck drivers about what are the reasons it's tough to be a truck driver, what discourages them. Truck parking is a big one. Detention and delay at customer facilities is another. You heard the gentleman before me mention the ELD mandate. You also heard him mention billboard lawyers. There's real truth to that. Truckers have a tough job. There are not many other jobs, especially safety sensitive jobs, where you spend your time around amateurs in your workspace. You think about it, a trucker goes down the highway and he's surrounded by people who aren't trained drivers. They just passed a license and they're zipping in and out. They're doing whatever. And the gentleman who said that some people hit trucks on purpose was telling you the truth. Some people hit trucks on purpose for the chance at a big payday. There are people in jail in Louisiana because it was such an organized event down there. Even the attorneys got thrown in jail because it's known to be a lucrative payday. And having folk advertise as you drive down the highway that, hey, you're an evil person and you should be sued, doesn't encourage a lot of people to get into the industry. So that's part of the problem. And then it is a tough job. It is a difficult job to do. And of course, related to all that is the insurance cost and availability that you've already heard about. And we can go into that a little more. There are firms, some well-known like Nationwide, that has left the Georgia market and won't write for truckers anymore. And there are other firms that say they still write in Georgia, but as the commissioner alluded to, they go way beyond that $17,000 per year per vehicle. And they'll say they still write, but it might be $30,000 a vehicle. And you can't really start or run a small business if you're paying that for your truck because trucks don't produce that kind of margin. I do want to tell you, though, these are good jobs we're talking about, and it's to the benefit of all of Georgia for us to get more people involved. These are the averages from 2021. LTL is less than truckload. Yellow famously just went out of business, but those are the hub and spoke trucking operations that move smaller than a full truckload from one spot to another, and then they break it up and deliver it, maybe even deliver it directly to your home. National vans, those are the guys that are JB Hunt, Schneider, the 53-foot trailers that you're used to seeing go down the highway. Van dedicated is the same thing, but it's just got a dedicated run for perhaps one company under contract. Tank local are the people who keep the QTs, the racetracks, the convenience store gas stations filled and other things like that. The average of all truckload carriers is now about $70,000 a year on average. And the more specialized like flatbed or the longer haul LTL, which is from city to city, are in the 70s. Refrigerated, which is folks delivering to your grocery store or to the factories for meat processing and that sort of thing, 75. And private carriers, Walmart famously is known, they have $100,000 truck drivers over there. And, so the averages are up. These are significant dollars. We have good pay for people if we can find the people. And again, that at 18 to 21-year-old is part of the problem of finding those people. We also have good benefits. These are the kind of benefits that are being offered: paid holidays, paid leave, lodging, meals and incidentals covered, life insurance, health insurance is almost 100%, retirement plans in almost every industry. And you can move on because there's just more of the same. And then finally, it's already been mentioned that part of our problem is turnover. Most of the turnover is churn in the industry, sign-on bonuses, things like that. People moving from trucking company to trucking company. That can skew things though, because people may leave a particular aspect of the industry and go off and leave a shortage in that aspect of the industry while filling the need in some other part of it. And just as an aside, I want you to understand how pervasive truck driving is. Everybody needs it. I mean, we're here at Greystone Power. It's a great co-op. They have CDL drivers here. And they have a problem if CDL drivers here find out they can make more money being a CDL driver over the road, so they'll go off and do that. That's what happens in the industry. Everybody needs truck drivers. And so we've got to do what we can to help bring more into this industry. And if you would. One of the things I want to touch on too is truck parking. And I mention that because Georgia DOT is already doing a study and doing a lot of work on it. The chart you see is evidence of a truck parking problem. The red dots are parked. This is a 4-day period. The green lines are trucks traveling. Now, if you could get in close enough, those are individual discrete trucks by GPS. They're tracked. The data is anonymized so that we don't know what individual company it is. Those are trucks. This is I-10 out, I-80 West rather, out in Iowa, and similar things you see in Georgia. All the red are trucks that are parked on the side of the road. And they're parked on the side of the road because of the big red blotches, which is where the truck parking is, and it's filled. Now, truck drivers have to take rest breaks at a certain time. They have hours of service they have to comply with. And so they've got to stop when they've got to stop. And the gentleman mentioned ELDs, the electronic data recorders there are draconian. You can't fudge it for 5 minutes. You can't say, okay, I'm just 5 minutes away from a good rest stop. You got to stop when you got to stop. And that's why you see this truck parking on the ramps. It's a problem we're seeing in Georgia that a decade ago we didn't see. But as I said, GDOT's working on it, and I'd encourage you as a committee to encourage them to keep working on it and look at what we can do to create more public rest stops and public parking areas for trucks, perhaps using the right of ways in and around our interstate system. Another thing that you just should be aware of is the way we pay. Per mile is still the most prevalent in the industry. Now, if you think about it, per mile becomes that makes it really important. Congestion, parking, things like that become real important when you're being paid by how far you traveled. So those are real issues. We're seeing more and more of hourly fixed salaries as people try to stem the truck driver shortage by saying, okay, we'll guarantee you X amount of dollars, and we'll take the risk as a company if you're less productive than we need you to be, and you can move on again. And then more of the same of different types. So as you see, it varies from segment to segment. And basically what has happened is the industry over the years, the market has figured out the best way to pay for different types of trucking. And so as we go through that, that's one of the things to be cognizant of, because in a lot of these areas, there's not a one size fits all answer. We do need to find a way to get more young people into the pipeline. I'm happy to tell you, we're actually getting more women into the pipeline. Ladies are finding out that $80,000 driving a truck can be a lot more beneficial than $30,000 as a hairdresser. And I'm not being facetious. We have quite a few folk who are in the beauty industry, doing nails, doing hair, whatever, that left that to become truck drivers. And about 10 years ago, less than 5% of the drivers were women. We're now up to about 10% of the drivers being women, and that increases every year. So it's a good opportunity for folk, women, minorities, just anybody. Truck driving is a great opportunity, a great career. And then we're back to that misleading chart to finish. So with that, I'll be happy to answer any questions.
We'll go to the Zoom, and Ed, thank you for that. I do think at a future meeting, and I'm glad you raised the discussion around public facilities and parking, because I know hearing from truck drivers on the road, or even some of the ones I've even talked to that frequent, the truck stops in Haralson County along Interstate 20. I know there's a lot of concerns, and a lot of them talk about that if there's not a spot at one of those truck stops, whether it's Lowe's or whatever, they have high concerns about security issues and other things. And I know the Haralson County Sheriff's Office is an example. We've had discussions about needing, greater cuts in the median to get to the visitor centers and the trucking areas to help people when there's an issue, instead of running all the way to Alabama and back. So, I mean, those are, some people may think those are small things, but, we're talking about this discussion and why I want to be a truck driver. I think these individuals and their families, they weigh these things on their mind, especially for truck drivers that sometimes might be traveling with their spouse or significant other or family members while they're on the road for, many days at a time. So, Senator Gates, Senator Dozel, any comments or thoughts on the Senator? Okay. I think we're good. Senator Islam, any thoughts?
And if I may, Senator.
Yeah, please.
I left you a study from the American Transportation Research Institute about bringing younger drivers into the industry. This is something the industry's been working on, and I've left a copy for everyone with Anna.
Okay. Well, I appreciate it. And we will, I think we'll talk to Commissioner McMillan and just see if we can get an update on what's going on with facilities and the build out and just kind of the plan. And I know right now we're going through this freight and logistics exercise in terms of updating the freight map. And I know I've had conversations with GDOT about, these two things and what is the impact on West Georgia. So thank you for everything that you do to represent your industry. Thank you. Next up, Hunter Loggins with the National Federation of Independent Businesses to talk about this issue. Hunter, thanks for coming out.
While she's getting that loaded, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm Hunter Loggins, National Federation of Independent Business. We are a small business association with over 6,000 members here in the state of Georgia. One of which is online now, and you'll hear from him in a minute. If you want to go ahead. The good part about going towards the end is most of this info has already been covered. As Ed just mentioned here, the U.S. has a shortage of 80,000 truck drivers, which is a 30% increase from before the pandemic. And as he projected, 100 million new drivers will be needed in the next decade. A little bit of data here that we'll touch on. Ed mentioned that it might be misleading, that one on the right, but it still looks like it's increasing. And that little graph to the left is what are the primary factors for the truck driver shortage? Some of the main ones, high average of age, which was touched on a little bit earlier. Some of the states that have legalized marijuana, truck drivers are still need to pass a drug test, and that's becoming more and more difficult. It's been talked a lot about the minimum age of 21. A lot of other states are lowering that, which we'll get to in a minute. And schools, they're having difficulty getting these CDL licenses because it's so difficult to, start up a school. And our member on the call will touch on that in a little bit. And women making up only 7% of drivers, but it was encouraging to hear Ed say that that is increasing. So that is good news. Others, lifestyle issues, they're on the road for a long, long time. And just this day and age, work-life balance is a little bit tough when folks don't want to be on the road as much. Infrastructure issues, the lack of parking and truck driver stops that was touched on. That's a really big one. Criminal histories is another, and there's some other states that are working on easing those restrictions. And there's a few other, we could go on and on. Let's get into the small business issues just in general real quick. 91% of our small business owners have a problem with inflation. So they're not being able to hire their truck drivers. They're not able to pay them as much. And they've been paying for more per load, as you can see from our member in Blakely. Regulations is another big one. Red tape. I know the legislature has done a great job of examining the problems facing our small businesses, and we applaud them for that. But if you give a mouse a cookie, our small businesses, we could always use more. And there's a quote by John who will touch on that in a minute. Of that, of our members, there's a poll of our members, 71% have positions to fill. And 92% of that 71% are having trouble finding qualified candidates. And if you want to go to the next one, why are they having that difficulty? Lack of education, work experience, and work ethic are the main things when we surveyed our members, what they're saying. Go ahead. So we've talked about the problems. We all know the problems. Let's get into some solutions. I want to thank the legislature and the governors and everyone in leadership for funding for the technical colleges and the CDL, more CDL facilities that have been implemented. As you can see there, Columbus Technical College, they recently opened up a new CDL facility that's expanding the driver programs to address this shortage and funding. The Governor Kemp's emergency education funding helped with these schools, along with the technical system of Georgia and public-private partnerships. We look at what other states are doing. In New York, the governor signed a bill that lowered the age to 18-year-olds to be able to have a CDL license as long as they remain in state. That's something Georgia could look at doing. We might want to touch on what Mr. Lewis said, is looking at increasing the education within the high school system to maybe have them not be so dangerous on the road as he touched on. And as Commissioner King touched on, let's get some more opportunities for veterans in here. Michigan, they signed a bill that would require, well, it's a knowledge test for CDL drivers with skills in the military, that those transfer over, and that would help the shortage. In Virginia, they created a whole initiative. It's called the Virginia Ready Initiative, and it touches on the workforce in general, but they partnered with the Virginia Trucking Association to find the needs of our truck drivers industry and to shuttle workers that they find into the jobs that are open. No, we're good. In South Carolina, Governor McMaster did a complete waiver during the pandemic. And Georgia touched on this a little bit when it comes to the weight of truck drivers, but they did a complete overhaul and just a pause on some of the the red tape for our truck drivers. And on the right, it also within the bill, it required the legislature and agencies to do a complete revamp and examination of their codes to find redundancies and maybe help out our folks that are struggling with, when I said red tape earlier. And also in South Carolina, funding the 17 million expansion of the program for workplace scholarships to help place not only truck drivers, but any technical skilled worker. But mostly what we're looking at is truck drivers because that's the main problem here, along with some scholarships and tuition. Another one is inmate rehabilitation in New Mexico. They're offering a 6-month training program for inmates looking to get back into the workforce. In Tennessee, they were working with third parties to help with testing, but also to create a commercial driver's license program for rehabilitated inmates. And this is, I'm going to end on this one. This is something I thought was very interesting. The governor of Arizona, he lengthened the validity of the learner's permits from 6 months to a year for additional training, which Mr. Lewis touched on that could be a problem with, especially with younger drivers. This could help alleviate that worry. It also, they created the Arizona Department of Transportation created a third-party system. If you want to go ahead, it's called the Arizona Transportation Consultancy Project, which essentially they requested guidance from the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration to determine which actions would be permitted federally. And they got a little bit of leniency, so they were able to expand their options with third parties to provide CDLs and what is required by a school to administer them. But it also allowed them to collaborate with other states to adopt similar improvements to the programs. And I mean, this is just wishful thinking, maybe helping and talking with our members of Congress to be able to have these systems work through interstate commerce, which I thought that was a good idea. I don't want to take up too much of your time because we do have one of our members wanting to speak about his issue, but I could take any questions if there are any.
You want to go ahead and let your member speak, let John speak, and then we can go into questions. And
Yeah,
then we'll
absolutely.
just hit both of y'all. Thank you. If you want to introduce him.
Sorry, John. This is John Sandeman. He's a member of ours at NFIB, also on our leadership council. He's been dealing with truck driver issues for as long as I've known him and probably a lot longer. He works for Samson Trails Incorporated. They're a charter bus system, but he'll be able to tell you a little bit more about it. Thanks, John.
Thank you, Hunter. Thank you for letting me speak today. Sorry I couldn't be there in person. But the challenges we face as an industry have just become untenable, especially since the lockdowns. Increasing regulations, the government took the opportunity to double some of the requirements we face when having just to run our company. And they've also made drivers personally liable for some of the accidents that they might be responsible for. I know one case of a truck driver who a young girl sped through a stop sign, hit his truck, killed herself. And he ended up, because he was 10 minutes over his allotted time driving, he was blamed for the incident and spent a year in jail. You know, now he can no longer drive anymore, lost his means of living. And Georgia's done some things like that during the pandemic, the DDS created an app called the Georgia DDS to go, which is what we're required to, once a driver renews their medical card, they're required to attach it to their license, which you normally have to go in person to DDS to do that. You have 15 days or they suspend your license. Well, I had a driver that used the app to do that because we could not go in person. The app said it successfully was attached to his license, but we found out later it was not. When I had a DOT audit later, it came out that that did not happen. And he had been driving technically with a suspended license, even though his medical card was valid and his driver's license was valid. And that inspection resulted in a downgrade of our company from satisfactory to conditional, which now I'm worried if I could even get insurance as the insurance goes. It's really being driven by these nuclear verdicts. I know other people spoke to that. I had a case in a school bus where a young girl and her mother were trying to make it to my school bus. We were not moving. We were parked, actively loading students. Nobody directed anybody to go across the street. But the mother and child run across the street to make the bus because they were late. They get hit by a car, which kills the little girl. She was 8. And the mother was severely injured. We weren't involved at all. It was somebody else. It was a legal stop. We were, I don't know, 40 or 50 feet away. We get sued, and because of comparative liability, there was a case, a legal loophole that if you only have one defendant on the case, no matter how much I'm liable, if it's even just 1%, I'm liable for 100% of the damages that are awarded by the jury. In a mock trial of that case, jurors were suggesting that we pay upwards of $136 million for a case where we weren't even moving and nobody hit us and we hit nobody. And that eventually paid out $5 million in my policy, which resulted in my rates going up by 90% the next year, and I had to change carriers. So I went from $15,000 a unit on motor coaches to $24,000 a unit. And now I'm looking at going up to $40,000 per unit for insurance, just because of the nature of nuclear verdicts in this state. And as far as driver shortages go, I've been trying to start a school to train drivers. The goal of it is to train people coming out of the military to get them, because most of them have driven all kinds of very large vehicles, but the military cannot give CDLs. So I wanted to start a driver training school that actively sought people coming out of the military, maybe they're not making it their career, and we can train them on Class B and Class A vehicles. Bianca can speak to this later, but we spent over 2 years and over $100,000 trying to start this school, and we got nothing but roadblocks everywhere we went from the state and trying to start it. And I'll let her speak to that when you get to it. But the concept we all need to be aware of, there's a phrase, it's called limited resources are subject to alternative uses, which that means the resource in this case are drivers. And a young person, they have options. And if the option of driving a truck or a bus, I have some that do make $100,000 a year. But if they also risk jail time because somebody else runs into them, or because these rules have gotten so restrictive, it's almost impossible for them to actually perform the job. They're just not going to do it. Doesn't matter how much it pays. We need some protections for the companies in place that don't allow for these massive settlements that just don't make any sense. And at Fulton County and DeKalb County are probably the 2 worst as far as jury pool selection goes, because people get up there and they see these large numbers and they just want to hand out lottery tickets. And you speak to any defense lawyer and they'll say the same thing. But let's see, where else was I? So we have an in-house driver training program that we've developed. I bought some Class C vehicles that don't require a CDL, and I have jobs for those vehicles. And we train these people in what's called the Smith system. It's a truck driving nationally recognized system. We add some of our own twists to it. And so we train people, they get to drive these smaller vehicles. And once we get them a year or so under their belt, we'll help them get their Class B license. We need a Class B with a P endorsement and an S endorsement. That's P for passenger, S for school bus. And then later we can train them to drive the larger vehicles. They're 45 feet long, 102 inches wide, about 12 and a half feet tall. So it's a large vehicle. And we just have a hard time. I've got 3 different agencies I've hired to find people for me. And we might look at 60 people and maybe 3. We might try might hire 1. And I don't even know if they'll stay with me for a month or 2. And sometimes I've had one guy try to park a motor coach inside on somebody's personal driveway of a home, ran over a dogwood tree, and then just takes off. So I had to fire that guy. So I might hire 2 and lose 1. It's very frustrating because I was running 62 units prior to the pandemic. I'm running 28 today, and I'm doing that because I don't have enough drivers. So it makes it difficult when all these things, I now have to use these 28 units to make enough revenue to cover the notes on the units I can't run because I don't have people to drive them. In addition to that, inflation has hit us. Fuel went up like 90%. Most parts went up 50%. I have some parts that went up 1,500%. So we're really just in an untenable situation. We need some help. We need some relief. And I'll let Bianca speak to how difficult it was to start this school that we now can't start. Bianca, you go ahead.
Hello. Thank you so much for having me here today, guys. Thank you, Chairman. My name is, as John mentioned, Bianca Thrasher Starobin, and I have worked with Samson Tours, John Samdeman, the Samdeman family for a number of years on business development and government relations opportunities. And I just want to first start by saying it's a family-owned business, generations, good, hardworking people. It's just, I consider them part of my family. So when John reached out to me to speak to the experience that he had with starting the school, what the Samson Tours had with starting the school, I said, absolutely. And I was supposed to be out of town today. And it's like, whatever I need to do to be here, I'm thankful that we're having the virtual. So if someone could please show the document, that'll be great. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. All right. Once that gets up, I'll continue.
We could see you. We could see
Okay,
you.
perfect. Okie dokie. So I wanted to talk about some of the experiences that we had in the application process. My job was to start the school, to get it going from the very beginning to the end. I just want to first start by saying this process started in October 2020. And finally, June 2023 is when John just said, you know what, let's just back up from this because so many resources have been expended, so many different just red tape barriers. And I'm just going to speak to some of the red tape and the experience that I had. In no way, shape, or form am I seeking to judge DDS, but I'm going to speak my truth. And that's what I was asked to do. With regard to the certification process, I guess I'll start in the left-hand upper corner. The team with DDS was understaffed. And so there were many times from the time that we got our first application, from the time we first went to the website, where things just didn't match up on the application that were on the website, some of the requirements. And when I reached out to the office, that I was not able to get in touch with anyone, sometimes not days, but sometimes for weeks. I wouldn't get a reply to my emails. I would not get a response to my voicemail. And then I'm kind of a go-getter person, which is part of the reason why we work so well together. And I would say, hey, look, I can come out to the office, I can bring lunch, whatever needs to be done. And because some people were working virtually, I was never able to get out to the office to just kind of like go over the questions, get some answers, give them what they need. That never happened. The other thing is the approval process. I'm working from the left side. In the middle of the application, there were rule changes all of a sudden. One example would be the new pilot VIN program. We've already submitted an application, and then they come back and they send me an email saying, hey, look, we're doing this pilot program. So now Samson Tours is expected to jump over here and jump through these hoops, which include various different rule changes. And then when we have questions about the rule change, then the team themselves, they don't even understand. And then I don't know, it seemed like there was like a regime change. I like to call it a regime change, but folks were replaced or folks were fired, I'm not sure, which brought on a whole set of other additional challenges that we had. We were asked multiple times to submit the same documents, and I would go back and reference emails and show, look, I submitted those documents already, so I don't understand why they're asking for them. And then because of the time frame from 2020 to 2023 with the application process, we were expected to resubmit for fire inspection. So not only do I have to, like, am I navigating this stuff with for Drive Pro University, which is the name of the school that we were seeking to start, but now I have to go back to the municipalities and say, hey, we need to get another fire inspection when nothing has really changed. That's one of the examples. I mean, now we need to do another business license, additional cost for the Samdemans, constantly having to, and then oftentimes not through our own fault, because for weeks we're reaching out to them, for months we're reaching out to them, we're not getting responses so that we can do what we need to do so that we can get approved so that the Samdemans can go on and start generating revenue for their investment in this business venture. Another thing, like for example, like the range inspection with the application, there were just new parts, new expectations, new guidelines constantly coming at us. And just watching them have to go through that was just so disheartening, because they're good people. They are contributing to the economy. They want to help the service disabled veteran-owned businesses. They've got great ideas and they're making things happen in addition to running Samson Tours. And they're just getting hit with one roadblock after the next, after the next. Another thing was like the fingerprinting portion of the application. And the beginning part, it said, hey, look, we need you to get, we need to start the fingerprinting. And then we submit that and they say, oh no, we don't do it until afterward. And it's just like, it was just, as I would come to them and report, it would be so frustrating because I like for things to be moving progressively, but it was almost where it would fall into my lap that like, well, we don't know what's happening. And that just, that was really quite a shame. So just in doing government relations in other areas, I happened to be talking to a member of Georgia Technical College's administrative team, and I respect my relationship, so I'd rather not do the name dropping. But in speaking with him, he mentioned that GTC, and this could be hearsay, whatever, but this came from their people, actually loses money from the CDL program. So that was just, I was told that. I put that on the document. I have not researched anything outside of that, that information that was provided to me. So I don't know the accuracy, but I do know that person, and I don't see any reason for them to be dishonest with me. So I don't know if that's part of what was happening there, but all of this amounts to a domino effect of like just economic development. Why folks are not having, you can't get a driver if a driver can't even get into a program, and the Samsons were an opportunity for a driver to get into a program and to get their CDL truck driver training license and to go out there and start contributing to the economy and building wealth for themselves. So, and then I was just deeply ingrained into the process. I put together, just in doing research, put together the curriculum. So our curriculum was approved. It's just all of these other just red tape insurance challenges. I mean, it was so bizarre. Like they would say, okay, well, we need this type of insurance. So the Samdemans would go and they would get that type of insurance. And then we submit it. And then DDS would come back and say, okay, well, now we need this little line item change. It could be so simple as we need this person needs to own the policy, or this company needs to own the policy, and these names aren't matching. But it was all the DPU, it was all the Samdemans, it was all Samson Tours. And so it was just little tiny needling things like that. At some point in time, because I care so much about these folks and this family and this company, they're my own family, was just like, do they even want them to get this license, this application approved? And again, I don't want to bash DDS. I had, when I did get on the phone with folks, they were very kind. They weren't rude. They weren't mean, and they could have just been drained. But at the same time, here we are from 2020 to 2023. It should not have taken that long to get approval, especially when the curriculum, which they went through with a fine-tooth comb, once that gets approved, we're still having to resubmit the same application documents over and over and over again. So I don't want to continue. I certainly don't want to seem like I'm rambling, but it really was an unfortunate experience. And it really was an investment that's the Samdemans made, and they weren't able to get a return on their investment, and they weren't able to contribute to the economy, and they weren't able to create this new vertical. And so I just, and then in dealing with DDS, it was like, who do I go to? Who do I tell about this? And I really didn't know. So that's part of the reason that I'm here today. I'm thankful to be here today. If anybody has any questions, I'm happy to answer them. And I hope that this challenge can be overcome soon, because if Samson is going through it, then other folks are probably going through it as well. And that's all I have to say.
Well, first I want to say thank you, Bianca, John, and Hunter, for your comments, your presentation. Dang, that sounds pretty painful. It takes 3 years just to do some basic things with a business. I'm gonna turn it over to Senator Dozal or Senator Gooch first and see if there's questions. Senator Dozal, you're good? Okay. Leader Gooch, do you have anything you want to ask? Comments?
Just quick question. You may have said this and I missed it. What other states do you operate in, Samson Tours?
Well, our business is located in Atlanta near Hapeville, but we go through, I've been in all 48 contiguous states and 3 Canadian provinces. So we are an interstate carrier. We primarily stick to the Southeast and the Northeast, but we go all over. But we do train people. I have some equipment that only stays in the state, but the school buses. So I have the capability to train people in-house if I can find them. But I've even considered buying one of those LED billboard trucks, which is based on an Isuzu truck, and anybody with a Class C can drive it. Like, I would use that as part of the training and advertising. Which I think the trial lawyers know how to get in touch with those vendors. Yeah, probably. But, just kidding. But so your business goes outside of Georgia. My question was, what? And I don't want you to do this, but have you looked at other states? Which states would you use as a model if you had to move out of Georgia? Which state would you move your business to? That's a tricky question. I would have to basically do a study of who's most business friendly, and I have asked my insurance companies, where are the safest places for me to operate versus the most expensive places. Like, I no longer go to New Orleans. I no longer go to Washington, D.C. And I don't go to Miami, because Miami and New Orleans are the 2 most litigious cities in the nation. I've had people run into me on purpose in New Orleans twice, and they win. They get about $30,000 to $60,000. For like the other gentleman was speaking, might have $2,000 of damage, but it cost the insurance company $60,000. And that's common. It happens in Atlanta too. It's happened a couple of times here. But one of the things I was going to speak to that I forgot, when officers come to a scene, they have a lot of latitude as to who they cite. And oftentimes what happens is they will cite only the CDL carrying driver, even though they might know that the other driver of a Class C vehicle was at fault or was also breaking law. Like I have one case where a woman hit my school bus going well over the speed limit while looking at her phone. There was no brakes. She just slammed into it. But it was noted on the police report that she was speeding and distracted driving, but she was not cited for it. And when that happens and it goes to court, clever lawyers can say that, hey, you were cited, but the other guy wasn't. So now it's mostly your fault, even though everybody can see a bus. You should stop. So maybe if there's some requirement that officers cite everybody who is at fault, regardless of how much insurance they have. And I've had another case where he didn't cite kids who didn't even have a license driving a car that ran into my bus because he smelled weed on them and he knew them and he didn't want them to get in trouble. And that later came back as a lawsuit against me, even though they ran into my bus, which was sitting at a light. So
Does your company have a drug testing policy after every incident?
We're required to do that by federal law. So we have pre-employment and random drug screen process. Now that process was doubled by the feds during the pandemic. So they went from 25% of your pool to 50% has to be tested. And that's so, and same with alcohol, it went from 10% to 25%.
But after every accident, your drivers are tested within so many hours of the incident.
If someone's treated at the scene or if any vehicle is towed, we're required to test them. Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Any other questions?
There is, let me have a question. Yeah. Yeah, please. Go ahead.
You made John from committee earlier this year testifying on seatbelt liability. I didn't want to bring up tort, but Commissioner King started it and I'll just pile on. That is a huge issue for our members. Bianca mentioned earlier, death by 1,000 needles. We like to call it death by 1,000 paper cuts, inflation, insurance premiums, and liability claims. And that was a major issue for us. And we hope to continue the discussion moving forward into next session.
Yeah, and I appreciate that. And then I do want to make a couple comments on, I think, the comments that were made, Hunter, by your group and your friends you brought. So I did have a comment, and this is more, I guess, directed towards the senators, but I mean, I did have conversations with DDS and I mean, after I think hearing some testimony today, and then I think the discussion I have, I think it may be interesting to have actually the DDS commissioner, I think, come and present maybe some stats on what's going on with driver testing. I know one of the data points that was given to me in terms of forecasting for budget and determining, you know, where do more CDL sites, where they stood up around the state. My understanding, and they can correct me if I'm wrong, is that there really isn't a methodology on where these sites are located, how they're placed, in terms of modeling where the need is. So I think that would be an interesting conversation to have. I know there's some 2 centers that just opened in Forsyth and Douglasville that are averaging around 596 tests weekly and about 2,400 monthly. I did ask also about the interest, and I'm not going to put my technical college friends on the spot. These are my comments. But I think the realization of blending state funding for CDL sites for driver testing. I know we've attempted to do that here in Paulding County, Georgia in the past. But I think if we're going to be good stewards of tax dollars and maximize and be innovative, I think there's opportunities to see how, if we have trained instructors, certified, doing classes and doing these things, how do we blend that in with what DDS is doing in a county or region around the state to maximize opportunity? Since we do have a driver shortage of, 25,000 And then I think the other thing, the comments that were made, I think by Bianca, I've said it in Senate Appropriations and in joint meetings that I do believe overall TCSG is underfunded. But I also think too, we're acting like we're doing something and we're supporting blue collar workers, but the money isn't there to really, I think, back up those policy statements. And again, not to put the commissioner or any technical college president on the spot, but those are based on looking at the budget. And I know my colleagues that are on appropriations, you know, they can look for themselves also, but I think that's a concern if we're going to invest in this space, looking at the future. Those are my general comments on that, and I appreciate it. I may want to have more dialogue offline about what's going on, kind of real time, because again, it shouldn't take 3 years to go through nickel and diming a application for a business to be able to be efficient and run. So anyway, sorry for my rant. We're basically at the end of time. I just want to turn it over real quick to our majority leader, Chairman Dozel. Any parting comments before we leave?
Hey, I'll say one thing before Dolezal closes out. He's the more articulate one in the group. The safety of our citizens on our public highways is still a top priority. I do not want anyone that's listening to this meeting to think otherwise. We have to have safety standards. We have to have regulations to protect the general public. But, and then going back to the issue earlier, we talked a lot about civil justice reform. I believe that too has to be something that we approach this next session with sincerity and look at what we can do to help our business community, but also the residents and the citizens of our state to find and maintain affordable insurance. We do not want people driving up and down the road without insurance because they can't afford to get it. So we've got to address that issue, and we need all parties on both sides of this issue working together as we approach that in the upcoming session. But I just wanted to make sure everyone's clear. We're not trying to get rid of regulations. We're not trying to just dismiss the idea that we need regulations and we need bureaucracies in place to slow business down. That's not the intent. We have to protect the general public. And at the same time, we have to figure out a way to maybe fast track some of these processes. It should not take 6 months for someone to get a driver's license in this state or any other state in the country. And I think some of that could be coming from the Fed. So anything we can do with the technical college system, I think, is a step in the right direction. I look forward to Commissioner Dozier coming in a future meeting to discuss that as well. But thank you, Chairman, and everyone who participated in this today. It's been very helpful and gives us all some ideas and how to move forward. We want to thank Commissioner King as well. He did a great job on his testimony. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Dozel.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Senator Islam, good to see you as well. Appreciate the work of this committee and those who testified this morning. I've got really two thoughts. One, I think it's very easy to dismiss this issue as maybe being a singular industry issue until an Amazon truck pulls up to your house and you remember that Amazon truck, while not an 18-wheeler, is grabbing something from a warehouse that got there via an 18-wheeler. And as e-commerce continues to explode, as we look at freight logistics across the state and our growing needs for infrastructure, the success of the port and the predicted continued success of the port, I think is only going to exacerbate this issue. Mr. Chairman, I think one thing that's worth diving into the future is what the role of autonomous vehicles will be in the future as it relates to this industry. I do not believe that in 25 years, the vast majority of our trucks will be driven by humans. And so how we bridge that gap, I know that at the federal level, the Teamsters are fighting the autonomous side heavily because they're going to kind of protect the entrenched interests of the union drivers there. But that is something that, you know, with or without that political fight, that's something that's going to come. And I want to ensure that Georgia is ready for it, both on the regulatory side, but also just on the logistics side, in terms of having the lane capacity to handle those and having the infrastructure ready to support that industry as it grows as well.
Duly noted, and I jotted that down. Thank you, Senator Dozal. Senator Islam.
I want to say I've learned a lot today, and I think that I sympathize with Bianca's testimony that I think across the board, our state agencies are understaffed, and we can look into that at the state legislature to see how we can help streamline services to Georgians, and definitely see what solutions we can come up with prioritizing safety and making sure that we have the drivers that we need for economic development in the state of Georgia. Thank you.
Thank you. So our next meeting is September 19th at Coca-Cola Union City. I want to thank Kevin Perry for hosting us for our next discussion. High level takeaways, because I'm sure the agencies or otherwise will be blowing up our office in the next few days. So we will add, and I think it is probably a good, healthy conversation to Senator Dozal's point about having a discussion on autonomous vehicles. So we'll bring that to the table. I do think there's interest from hearing from the Commissioner of DDS. Also, Commissioner McMurray just talking about what's going on with truck parking and current and future plans and funding. And also too, I think a discussion from the technical college system. And I do want to recognize Ron Newcomb, the president of Chattahoochee Tech, my longtime dear friend, mentor, public servant who's worked for many past lieutenant and also governors. And I know on this topic, you've been a champion and a mentor to me. So I just want to say thank you for being here today. And I think also too, having more conversation on the veteran piece, which I know we passed the bill and unfortunately that was vetoed. But that bill is coming back, and look forward to working with the technical college system and others to see that happen. So with that, we are adjourned. Thank you to everybody online, our Senate staff, and everyone here. God bless.